Welcome to the AutoSuccess Executive Spotlight. I'm your host, Brian Ankney. Today my guest is Danny Zaslavsky from VinCue. Welcome.
Thanks, Brian.
I really appreciate you coming out to see us
man,
today.
absolutely. Thanks for having me here.
Where'd you come in from?
Kansas City.
Kansas City, Missouri.
No direct flights, by the way.
Oh, really?
but we got here. It was awesome. It was easy, actually. So you guys have a great office.
Well, thank you. Thank you. Well, I always like to get started with a little bit about you. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you ended up where you are today?
You bet. So grew up in the car business. My parents came over from Ukraine in '79, and my dad had a little shoe repair business at the bottom of a hill called Johnson Drive. And he walked up the hill one day to a tiny little car dealership on the edge of a building that used to be the Merriam Gas Building. And it had about 10 cars in the lot. And there was a guy there who decided to sell some cars, and my dad bought a car from him. He kind of befriended the guy, and he said, I think I'm going to hire my first employee. Can I come sell some cars for you? And Josh goes, sure, why not? And so my dad would literally walk up this hill and start selling cars until eventually they kind of figured out each other's superpowers, and they could really use each other, and they became business partners. And then I grew up in the shoe repair business, and then making that hike to kind of check on my dad, you know, either before school, after school, between school, all that kind of stuff. And then growing up in the car business, I inherited my dad in the sense that I'm an entrepreneur, and I begged him to sell cars. And at 14, I sold my first car.
Oh, wow.
And then continue to grow up in the car business.
Wow, 14. I mean, you weren't old enough to drive them, but you were old enough to sell them.
No, I wasn't old. Actually, so he gave me a Chevy Nova to drive around in the back, and it had no reverse and no passenger door. So I would drive in a circle and then roll up a hill and then roll backwards and then drive in a circle again. And it was a gravel lot, and there was other businesses around, so they were not very happy with me, but it was a blast.
That sounds fun. Well, I'd like to ask you about a term I've heard you use: full vehicle life cycle management. What does that mean?
Okay, so growing up in the car business, initially I really liked marketing, and I didn't quite understand why I liked marketing, but I figured out later that it's where technology existed in the car business when I was growing up, right? Because you got to list, or what they call now syndicate, vehicles between different marketplaces, and you started looking at data to understand what's providing the best return on investment, depending on the lead sources, and that to me felt like innovation. But the thing we also recognized is there were a lot of tools that began surfacing in order for us to do one job, which is to buy and sell a car. And within that, certainly there's a lot of innovation that happened on the front line with us, efficiencies, right? Where how do we do the very best trade appraisal process? How do we do the very best ingestion process for us to get that vehicle signaled to service so they can begin reconditioning? How do we identify disposition? Like, are we gonna, I call it WAR, wholesale, auction, retail. Are we gonna wholesale it to another dealer? Are we gonna auction it? Are we gonna retail it? All of these things really meant profit to the bottom line, and efficiency and pro-efficiency for our team. Well, as I was growing up, there were some really innovative companies that started creating solutions for every one of those different processes. But what I recognized probably in like 2014, and then started doing something about it by like 2016, was there were so many inefficiencies that were happening when your team is working in 5 different systems to manage one car, because they're using different ways to communicate, literally speaking different languages, and you miss out on some of the very best stuff, which is reporting, so that you know where to spend your energy. Curiosity. I mean, I can't say that enough. Curiosity is really what drove all of this innovation. And that curiosity was really about where are we buying the cars we're buying, and then how are they performing? So that way, once we can know how the vehicles were performing from the best sources and channels, then we can start changing our behavior. And so we recognize that insights on a screen drive behavior, and that drives profit loss. And some would call that a piece of culture, right? And that's been really the seed that has been continuing to grow into what we call today VinCue.
You know, it's interesting that you talk about culture and technology together, you know, and And, and you also mentioned, 5 or more logins.
Yeah.
One of the things I think is interesting in our technology-filled world is where when I've sold cars, I talk to my manager all the time. Like, he took TOs. He was very helpful.
Yeah.
But now it seems that a lot of managers, you're right, they're overwhelmed. They've got 100 or not 100. They've got a half dozen logins and in a bunch of systems that maybe don't communicate, and they're really just almost like clerks.
Okay, I'm on both sides of it. I own a car dealership and I co-own a software company. And if I was just on the software side, okay, it is very easy to walk the NADA floor and see all of these solutions and imagine, I'm not going to partner with any of them, I'm just going to build them. And then what happens? All of a sudden there's all these disparate solutions because everybody thinks they're an expert and they can build it all. If I flip my hat and I think, okay, now I'm only a car dealer and not on the software side, I can walk that floor and get what I call shiny object syndrome, where I go, I need that, I need that, I need that, and my people, I just expect them to figure out how to use it and make the best of it, right? Mm-hmm. The real answer is that neither is correct. The real answer is to really understand your zone of genius or your superpower. Ours happens to be inventory, acquisition, sales, trade process, and I want to talk about that a little bit more. But once you do that, then all of a sudden you go from going wide to going deep. And once you do that, then culture really benefits, and ultimately you can scale your business without being the only guy that's doing it.
Yeah. Danny, I've heard you use the term highest authentic value for a vehicle. What does that mean to you?
So this has always been a dream of mine. Number one, I believe that as dealers, we do so much that adds value to that vehicle, from reconditioning to certification to warranty to promises that happen after the sale on the fixed op side. Mm-hmm. All of those things have a lot of value, right? But when we're competing, selling a vehicle as a commodity, simply based on year, make, model, mileage, and maybe even a little condition, all of a sudden the consumer has no ability to pay more or less based on the value that you offer. And so we wanted to create technology that enables dealers to not just compete on price, but to compete on value. Mm-hmm. And that is a game of some psychology that happens in the store and in communication, but really a lot of technology that happens so that we don't have to have a small army of people crossing T's and dotting I's in the way that they syndicate, but where the system has the ability to grab build data, right? And for example, put into the description with everything that's in every package that's included, every value of that associated package, the contents of that package, high value SEO, grab reconditioning data that you want to communicate into it, grab specific overlays relative to that vehicle or to the campaign, and then also fight for audience. Not just when that vehicle gets old, but fight for audience day one, because we know insights such as like average days to sell and average price drop. The whole goal here is you have an asset. Mm-hmm. It's time that we start competing to get the highest authentic value of that asset. And there's a chance in there to outperform the market instead of underperform the market.
Interesting. So what you're saying is if I'm a consumer and I see 4 white Camrys all from different dealerships, that now I have the ability to see, well, wow, this one has new brakes, new tires from Recon. It's got the upgraded package and a sunroof, whereas I used to just see 4 white Camrys.
That's right. And that vehicle comes with a 6-month, 6,000-mile warranty. And by the way, this dealer has a 4.8-star review online. And by the way, this vehicle comes with free loaner service and. All those dealer promises are really important. And those are things that I know at my dealership I've been doing my whole life. And I know now getting the opportunity to work with many, many other dealerships, each one of them has a unique selling offering. Communicating that selling offering in the vehicle file when combined with the build data, that's where you start winning.
Well, yeah, I mean, that would make me a lot more excited to see all that fun stuff as opposed to just, here's 4 white Camrys, this one's $50 less, so I guess I'll look at it first, right?
That's right. That's right.
Cool. Well, you're really good at sourcing inventory from the public, and that's how you and I kind of first met. Is talking about that. How do you find the cars, and what's the process look like in your store?
Okay, so sourcing from the public. I'm going to share this with you. I've said this a couple times now, but I believe that I like mantras, and one of the mantras I really like is pain pushes, vision pulls. All right, and I think anybody who's ever achieved anything of real significance has been pushed by pain, whether it be personal, whether it be family, whether it be job, but they're really pushed by pain to a point where they get to decide, am I going to do something about this, or am I going to continue complaining or being a victim? At which point, hopefully they switch to vision, and that vision begins to grow. And you get pulled by it until you do something about it, and not just make your own life better, but make other people's lives better. One of those pain moments for me is when my dad had a stroke about 10 years ago. And he was the guy that was going to the auctions, going to other dealers' lots, wholesaling cars, and buying vehicles for our lot. And then we were responsible to sell them. And we were innovative in a way that we had a war strategy where the W stood for wholesale. We would sell vehicles to other dealers. Auctions would be auctions, and then retail would be obviously retail. When my dad had a stroke, he lost the ability to speak, and I knew I needed to do something about it. I've never liked going to the auction. I don't like competing with other experts. I didn't feel like I had a competitive advantage. I never felt like I walked away with the cars I actually wanted to buy, and nor did I feel like I was buying them for what I wanted to pay, regardless of the market. Like I was always paying over, and then I would get hit with more reconditioning because there would be stuff that was hidden. So I knew that if we got curious, hopefully you see a theme happening here, if we got curious about how to study the acquisition sales process versus just the sales process and understand the nuances that happen for a team to be able to buy cars direct from the public, then we could scale that. And then when we added technology to that, we could make it easier on our teams and scale that even further. And that's exactly what we did. So we took a traditional sales process and reversed it into an acquisition process and started thinking about what resources do we need, from perhaps incentivizing a title clerk, perhaps hiring a full-time buyer that lives in the store, to understanding what technology should we use to faster identify what cars we should be buying and from which marketplaces. Understand how to create a brand that communicates that we buy cars, not just sell cars. So today, if you call my dealership, they'll say, "Hi, Country Hill Motors, are you calling about buying a car or selling a car?" And then they go, "Oh, I didn't know you sell cars, or that you buy cars too." "Absolutely. Which one are you interested in?" "Well, I want to buy a car." Cool. So it's a part of our culture. The vision I had, I just didn't know how to execute it early on, was I wanted to create an engine. And that engine was to that within the store, it could self-sustain. The team could buy cars, the team could sell cars, and it could continually get better at it by using the right data and the right insights.
Yeah, that kind of leads me directly to my next question. Car dealers have always been in the business of selling cars, and you want to give them as little for the trade as possible, and you want to get as much for the one you're selling as possible. The customer comes in, they want to get as much for their trade as possible, and they want to pay as little as possible for yours. How does that change in the buying process? Like, how do you determine, you want to be competitive with those offers because you want those cars. Like, how does that change in your dealership, when you go from the we sell cars to now we buy cars and we sell cars?
So on the buying side, I'm very familiar with, steal the trade and all that kind of stuff, that philosophy. It's not a philosophy that I've ever personally adopted because on the buying side, we adopt what we call highest and best. When we are doing a sight unseen appraisal over the phone using technology to bid that vehicle, we always go with highest and best, understanding the limitations that vehicle might have, mechanical, cosmetic, and so on, history, right? Because on the acquisition side, believe it or not, it's actually easier to go down than it is to go up. So if that vehicle, in fact, has any issues, we can reconcile those issues in person when we go see the car, or if that car comes to us, versus starting at a low number and then trying to steal it and having that customer upset with us. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Well, I guess if you gave me a number too low on the phone, I may never even come in for you to see the car.
We never even have the chance.
Yeah. Interesting. But I guess if you tell me this is what it is with no problems, and I come in with the understanding that we're gonna look for those problems, Then when you say, okay, well, it needs tires, that's this. It needs brakes, that's this.
Yep.
And you got a scratch over here, that's this. And maybe now I'm understanding because you gave me the best offer on the phone that anybody gave me, right?
Well, it's not just offer, it's education. I think a mistake I made as a dealer early on was I thought that when I gave you, Brian, my customer, an offer on your car, it was almost offensive to me as a dealer if you didn't sell it to me. Today, that's not true. Today, I'm giving you an asset, and that asset is the confidence to know what your vehicle's worth. Doesn't mean you have to sell it. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
This is a process that happens on the fixed side all the time when we do QR hang tags on cars and a customer just wants to understand what the value of their car is. And there's other insights around that that we provide to our customer through VinCue, through our technology, such as what's the average price drop on that car over the last 3 months. And if we know that it's dropping on average $600 a month in value, I, as a consumer, would kind of want to know that. Or like around COVID, it was going up in value, right? It went up $2,000, $3,000, $4,000 in value. That's a really powerful insight to be able to know. The other thing is vehicle history, like a Carfax. Customers have to pay for that to get it on their own car. We as dealers have the ability to provide that to our customers. So all of these little things are assets and services we can give to our consumers that I think in the past we've taken for granted.
Well, my next question is about dealer groups. How can a dealer group behave a little differently in order to grow market share kind of as a whole as opposed to just individually?
Yeah, so this is something that I've gotten the privilege to observe. In working with different dealer groups, they have differences of culture and differences in strategy. And so what I mean by that is I've watched these dealer groups that actually behave like a group of dealers. And the nuance there is they are competing amongst each other. They are maybe doing buy bids back and forth to move inventory, depending on maybe there's some floor plan constraints or aging issues. And then they're each using different technologies. Maybe a group regionally is using one. And they're really behaving as a group of dealers. Then there's this other shift that I see where they go from being a group of dealers to really behaving as a dealer group. And the distinction, one of, is starting to look at a vehicle not just as the right car at the right price for that lot, but the right car for the right lot. So that if you are 5 miles from me, Brian, and you own Brian Motors and I own Danny Motors, and I'm trading for a vehicle, as a dealer group, if you have the potential to bring a higher value for that car because you're a Toyota store and I'm a Ford store and I'm trading for a Toyota, then that vehicle, if given the right insights, could come to you, and then the dealer group could benefit from that. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So for instance, maybe if you were to buy the car and you were to sell it on your lot, you might make a couple grand less than me on my lot. So you would say, now would you call me on the phone, or does the technology communicate that say, hey, Brian, I've got the perfect car for you?
Yeah, so this is what we call enterprise level management. And this is all technology that's in VinCue. So when we are managing inventory based on stocking, we can see where the gaps are based on your own sales, market demand, audience data, competitor data to know where we need to garner market share, as well as the assets that we currently own. From a stocking level, from a current active inventory level, from a sales level, from a pricing side, all of this can be managed centrally with a centralized team if the dealership has that appetite to go after centralized pricing and appraising strategies. Or central doesn't mean that you have to take all 30 of your stores down to one central team. It could be regionalized centrally, or it can even be centralized within a store. I'll give you an example. So we've adopted this thing called two-hand touch. Two-hand touch means if I have 2 sales managers sitting at a desk, I know that, Brian, if you come in to trade your car, depending on which sales manager you're going to go to, you're going to get a different number. Two-hand touch eliminates bias. Within the technology, what it forces them to do is both agree on the value that we're providing you, Brian, on trade. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And that's a technology capability that we can turn on and off within the system. So that is a small version of centralization, because the whole goal here is to get more data and insights to increase overall profit and churn, right? And when you can do that even in a store to remove bias, everyone wins.
You know, you mentioned audience in your answer to that question. I'm a little curious. What insights can you gain from your audience?
So traditionally, you know, what have we been looking at? We've been looking at VDP views. We've been looking at leads. And sometimes those are within an inventory management system. Sometimes they live outside of an inventory management company. The way we think about it is they should be tied to the vehicle records. So like, what does a CRM do? A CRM matches a customer to an asset. What VinCue does is matches the asset to the customer. So if you sell a car that had 9 leads on it, one of those customers bought, the other 8 are unsold. And when we take those other 8 and apply them to an appraisal, perhaps, and we can see how much pent-up demand you have on this vehicle you're bidding right now within the last 30 days or whatever field of time you want. Or when you have inventory that you've just ingested that has no leads yet, but all of a sudden you have 26 other people to call that just missed out on a vehicle just like this, right? What you're doing is not just cutting your days to market, but your days to sale. That audience information, when it is zoomed out and looked at for the entire store or perhaps to a region or to a group, is extremely powerful as one of the indicators we look at when we tie that to the buying plan itself. And the buying plan being the brain of the system.
That's interesting. So so within a dealer group, like if there's 30 stores or even regional, so you and I might be next door to each other, but then there's Tom over here that's really far away.
Yep.
And maybe I just sold a really unique car that I had 5 more leads for, and we find out Tom has one.
Yep.
We can.
And he's sitting there going, "I can't move this thing."
He can't move it because it's not right for his lot.
Yep.
And we're able to take those people, move them over there. Now the dealer group is able to make a profit instead of losing money.
That's right.
Wow.
That's exactly right.
That's impactful.
Yeah. Because, as an industry, we're so used to looking at market day supply and like-mind day supply. But the challenge with that is market day supply simply says that if no more vehicles like it come into the market, this is how long it'll take to sell through, right? But that really doesn't have anything to do with my buying plan or my unique ability to sell cars, right? And that's why the buying plan is so important, because we also look at average days to sale for my market on that vehicle and then relative to my buying plan. And then the average price drop. So if that vehicle lives online for 40 days, what's my job? Is to curb it faster than 40 days. But what else is my job? To conserve gross. And if we know that in 40 days that car is dropping $1,200, we know that on appraisal, we should take that into consideration. And then also when we're selling the vehicle, we're working to outperform the market. We don't want to be the average. We don't want to drop it $1,200 to get rid of it. So that's where we use all of the highest authentic value strategies to be able to get the audience we need on that vehicle faster and get that vehicle sold faster to the right home.
That's interesting.
Now, okay, so this is where I have to step back a little bit. Most of this isn't new. If you walk into a Target, if you walk into an REI, if you walk into any retail store, and you look at how they stock the shelves and think about SKUs and think about procurement and the teams behind all of that, this is the automotive industry, in my opinion, catching up to some of retail as it has already been behaving for the last 10 years. And so there's all these really cool insights and data, but the problem is it is not possible to manage all of those things in 5 different systems. Forever, dealers have been talking about, I wish I could do this in one system. And then that's the dream that we've been building.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Actually, I do want to ask you a little bit about automation. I mean, all marketing is, all marketing is becoming more automated. Is that a good thing or is that a bad thing? As far as a dealer trying to be unique and have their own personal brand, what are your thoughts on marketing automation?
Okay, so here's how I define AI. I define it as assisted intelligence. I don't think it's wise yet to treat it as artificial because assisted intelligence is effectively scaling process. That is what technology does. We built a system in order to scale best-in-class processes. VinCue does not build shiny objects because then you arrive at a spot where they say, well, how do you like this program? Oh, we only use 20% of it, right? Well, why do you only use 20% of it? Because it's a bunch of features. It's a bunch of shiny objects. Instead, we look at how to enhance every single process that lives within a car dealership. And then when we build something, it's meant to enhance that. So when you talk about automation, automation is meant to scale process. So I'll give you an example. When you ingest a vehicle, automation gives you the ability to understand what source and channel did you buy it from and automatically send that signal back to the buying plan. It watches the number of leads, VDPs, test drives that you get on that vehicle, sends it back to that buying plan. It will take all of the build data and apply it not just to the vehicle, but also to the vehicle comments to make a marketing person's job significantly easier so that they can shape that into how it's going to stand out in the marketplace. And then it's going to provide automation to making sure that that vehicle is put out in the market and stands tall. All of those things are still within the control of the dealership, but it gives them the ability to scale a better process. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah. So it's you basically define what a great description would be based upon the data that's there, and then it gives you like here's what it could look like, and you kind of somebody would just do a quick edit, and now it's up there as opposed to writing the entire thing.
That's exactly right, and it's not a bunch of adjectives or cheese. These are lethal weapons to be able to communicate effectively the real value of the vehicle.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. How would you define modern inventory management? We've talked a lot about inventory management. What's modern inventory management? And if you don't mind me asking, what's next for inventory management?
Okay, so traditional inventory management is linear.
Yep.
It is appraise, acquire, disposition, recondition, merchandise, and then sell. And it's linear, right? Hopefully you can see the little road in your head. That is traditional. And then you multiply that by hopefully more than 100 times a month in your store. Modern is a cycle. And within that cycle at the top is no longer acquire or appraise, it's the buying plan. Because the buying plan is the start line, in my opinion, the new start line. Because when you can take all of these different insights and begin to change behavior so that you understand which sources and channels you should be buying from and work to create an ideal inventory on your lot so that that cycle works seamlessly, and then you take that cycle and then you apply it to more, if you have more stores, right, and understand how to leverage that power, then you're beginning to not only increase gross and churn, but lower customer acquisition costs, lower reconditioning costs, unlock potential that is hidden within your fixed ops. These are all things that happen when you think of it as a cycle versus linear.
You know, we've talked about the buying plan a lot, and I'm a little curious because you were saying that the buying, we know how many leads came in, and the buying plan knows it. We know how many test drives, the buying plan knows it. We know how long it takes to sell, the buying plan knows it. I mean, like if I'm a manager at your dealership, am I looking at this buying plan and it says, well, Brian, the book value on this car is this, but at our dealership, it's worth maybe it's 1,000 more, maybe it's 1,000 less, all based on the buying plan. So I'm getting educated on what the car's worth to me as opposed to what the car might be worth in the market. Did I get that right?
You're absolutely right. We are interested in creating more experts in the field, right? So there's never any data that we hide. An example of that is in the old system that I used to use, I didn't have any control over my competitive set. Competitive set is really important. If I'm appraising a vehicle, and obviously I have my books and my filters, but I want to know who am I competing against, and can I remove any offenders? Like maybe there's a buy here, pay here in there that's doing a cost plus strategy and not a price to market strategy. They don't belong in my comp set. Maybe there's a vehicle with a bad Carfax and mine's a clean Carfax. They don't belong in my comp set. That is one example of how we give more control to our dealers to be able to make sure that they're competing not just on price, but on value. And when you take that and zoom that out into strategies around buying cars and droves for your lot, it makes a really big impact.
Wow, I mean, that makes sense, especially if I'm looking to buy your car, and I don't really want to, and yours has never been in an accident, it's in great shape, it doesn't need tires. I don't really need to look at what the comps are if they're not in great shape, no accidents. I mean, I only want to look at ones like yours. And so maybe the difference between you leaving or me paying you another $500 is a lot more clear to me.
Yes.
Right? I mean,
that's right. And it works on the flip side when I'm selling a car. Within our system, if you were coming and buying a vehicle from me and said, hey, Danny, by the way, I'm comparing this vehicle to another one just like it down the street, our system has the ability to do what's called a head-to-head, where we can look at our promise relative to their promise, our build data relative to their build data, how long they've had the vehicle and where it came from relative to ours. And that's something I failed to mention. History within our system doesn't just mean Carfax. History within our system shows you everywhere that vehicle's ever been since it was new, meaning where did it sell for new, what did it sell for, and then did it go through an auction, and what CR did it have at the time it went through the auction, what did it sell for, where did it end up next, all the way till it reached you. So that if that vehicle went through Mannheim, PA with a 2.9 CR in 2022, you know that at the point of appraisal.
Interesting. My final question for you is a fun one.
Okay.
You know, I don't know that I've had too many people that have as much retail experience and vendor experience as you.
Okay.
And so as a dealer and as a software vendor, you have a pretty unique perspective. With all the craziness that's going on in automotive right now, where's retail automotive headed?
So I think that we are in a process revolution. I don't think it's really as much of a technology revolution that's happening. Certainly, our industry is being disrupted by AI, by so much technology that is trying to creep into our car dealerships. But the best performing stores that I see are at the wheel of their own business steering process and being curious about what solutions do we need to enhance our process versus not knowing what process they need and then trying to buy technology and then ask their opinion of how it's going to help them. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I think that's the distinction of the dealerships that are going to really succeed over the next 10 years and the ones that are probably going to get sold to others that are succeeding.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it does seem that, and it seems like a lot of the technology now is being more, it's accommodating the dealer's process a little bit better, where it seemed like 20 years ago and 10 years ago, technology, they would come to you and say, you have to run it this way because this is the way it works. But now, like you were mentioning on-off switches and customization, it seems like the technology will accommodate the dealer's processes as opposed to the dealer accommodating the technology.
Yeah, and the cool part is it's not the witch's brew that it used to be. It used to be that somebody would come to me and explain something and my mind would go, I don't get it, but if it works, go ahead and do it, right? Today, there's enough resources, enough information, enough transparency out there that as business owners of car dealerships, if we don't know, we should have somebody within our org chart that manages the technology stack within our car dealership because it touches every single person. And remember, technology only scales process, not the other way around. So fight for the best process first and then scale it with best-in-class tech.
Thank you for coming, Dan.
Yeah, man.
This was fun.
Yeah, thank you very much.
And thank you for taking the time to join us for this AutoSuccess Executive Spotlight. I'm your host, Brian Ankney. Today, my guest has been Danny Zaslavsky from VinCue. Thank you so much for coming. This was a fun one.
Yeah, thank you very much.
This episode is Over the Curb and Burning Gas.